So guys, this is Tinubu's economic advisor who came out to say Nigerians are just faking their hunger because in Nigeria you can afford to buy food of $1 that will satisfy you, which is not possible in other places of the world. So guys, you need to see the mindset of the people who are advising Tinubu on economic matters. If they have this kind of mindset, then you shouldn't wonder why Nigeria is not working, because for them there is no hunger on ground. I mean, for them Nigerians are not suffering. So guys, I'm going to allow you to take a look at how Dr. Abati tackled him during this interview session, but before then, take a look at this short analysis on what this advisor to Tinubu said, and then you are going to be also watching what Dr. Abati told him during this session. Just take a look for yourself.
There is a hard proof that people who advise in Bola Tinubu no get sense. I'm sure you're familiar with Bola Tinubu. Even if you're not familiar with him, I'm sure the hardship he's causing in the country will make you get used to him. If I was not recording this video early in the morning, I for shout because he wished to shout. But let me play you what one of his advisors said, and I will let you know why I think he is senseless.
$10 won't buy you lunch anywhere in the US, hardly. You need at least $20. $20 times two, that's 30,000. I'll tell you what you can do with $5. $5 that's 7,500. If you're not going to eat at the Hilton or some eyebrow place, there's a lot you can do. In Guaripa there's people that sell, just like in Port Harcourt, Boli and fish on the roadside there. You eat for 1,500. If you know where you're coming from, you say you're on minimum wage.
Sorry, Mr. Advisor. The problem is not that it's cheap or costly. The problem is affordability. Let's do simple mathematics, a subject I'm very sure that you were not very good at in school. You see that person spending $20 on lunch in the US. You know the least he can earn as minimum wage? Around $7. Let's say he works for 6 hours in a day. That's around $42. $42, since you like to convert, that is almost 70,000 Nigerian Naira. Now, that person spending $20 out of the $42 has not even spent up to 50% of his earning on that day. Now, in contrast, somebody in Nigeria, what is the minimum wage? 70K. That is audio. Not a lot of people earning that 70K, but let's just say 70K. If you divide that by 30, you get around 2,300 Naira. Now, if that person spends 1,500 Naira on that your nonsense lunch, that person would have spent over 60% of the earning of that day just to eat one lunch. Now, how many people even earn this 70K in a month? How many people? Second, what is the quality of the $20 meal compared to 1,500 Naira meal? Because it's not as if we want meals or anything to be cheap in Nigeria. No, we don't. We actually want quality stuff. We want people who are into the business to actually make money. We want to pay for...
Nigeria is facing a tough economic crisis in decades, with skyrocketing inflation, a national currency in free fall, and millions of people struggling to buy food, while others continue to leave the country for greener pastures in Europe, under the term popularly referred to as Japa syndrome. Currently, Nigeria seems to occupy the fourth place in Africa's economy, despite its huge population and potentials. However, in spite of these economic downfalls, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's special economic advisor on economic affairs, Dr. Tope Fashua, has defended the value of the Naira locally, despite its weakness against the dollar, saying that $1 equivalent to over 1,500 Naira can still buy a meal in Nigeria. Joining us now on this morning's show to discuss President Tinubu's economic strides is Dr. Tope Fashua, special advisor to President Bola Tinubu on economic affairs. Good morning, Dr. Fashua, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Abati. It's good to be here.
Morning.
And good morning. Anyway.
Well, I see you've been in the news. You've been very controversial. But the reasons for you being controversial, I do not think I knew, because you said the same thing more or less as far back as January and even during the campaigns before you got rewarded for your support for President Tinubu. But I will need you, for the purpose of clarification, to explain to us why you think that multidimensional poverty is not a big deal And it is something that Nigerians can live with. You say, oh, people are panicking because when they hear multi-dimensional, they think it's a problem.
So they think it's worse than food poverty.
And then you say that Nigerians can live on $1.
No. I said a meal.
Yes, that we can
one
feed.
Meal. And
we can feed.
Yes, let me allow you to laugh.
But that if you go to New York or you go to anywhere in the US, you will need at least $10 to feed. Is that a justification?
It's not a justification.
For the inability of the Tinubu administration so far to address the crisis of hunger, poverty in this country. Because, economists, you people, on one hand, on the other hand, in between is voodooism. This is what I see here.
On one hand, I say, thank you very much, Doctor. So, actually, that discussion itself, which was part of a 1.5 hours interview that I had on with Shehu, is actually an elevated economic discussion. The discussion around purchasing power parity, purchasing PPP analysis is actually a bit discredited because, culturally, the idea is to compare what people buy in one country with what they buy in another. But culturally, people have different choices. There's not a mala on the streets in New York, for example. So you have to do something different. So they even have this burger analysis. But, only our children eat burgers. I'm not a fan. So the whole idea was to say that, indeed, $1 is still valuable in Nigeria, whereas in a place like New York or in a place like US, you struggle to get anything with it. You struggle, indeed. And that's why that analysis came that when we were talking about the issue of poverty, I said, listen, perhaps we need our own indexes beyond the $2 or $2.50 a day that's been recommended. That the fact that those indices have been recommended doesn't mean we should take it hook, line, and sinker, because we know our country, we know our people, we know our culture more than the people recommending. So this idea of buying policies off the shelf, plug and play, that's what we're addressing there. So now the point is also to say that my concern really, sitting as an economist, is for us to say, let's discombobulate this issue of poverty and hunger so that the government is not constantly gaslighted. And I'm not talking about this government alone. So you served in the Jonathan government, the same rhetoric. Also, there's so much poverty and hunger in Nigeria.
People could feel very well.
People could feel very well under Jonathan. Okay.
It was not a problem.
I agree. But look, we inherited a problem in this country. Right from independence today, even pre-independence, people have always struggled with poverty. However, that's what the issue now is to say, how are we trying to solve it and how are we trying to ameliorate it, given the fact that there's poverty everywhere in the world? My key concern, actually, why I've made a bit of a media tour, is that, part of the ways we try to solve or reduce the impact of inflation and spiking poverty is to agree on a minimum wage of 70,000. Some of the states have taken it to 80, some 75, some 78, and so on. This morning I was reading in one of the newspapers, I think it's Punch, that indeed only 16 states have actually effected. So, and I think that we need to put the rest under pressure to effect this minimum wage, because we can't expect people to continue to survive on the same salary that they were earning 2 years ago, given the fact that inflation in some critical goods like food, in some instances, have gone up 100%, 200%. So, and not only those, even the private sector, because the minimum wage is also binding on the private sector. And that's only one aspect. So therefore, if you see, I've met people who say they're still being paid 40,000 naira for a full-time work. In fact, it is against the law, because there's a law now that says you can't pay someone in full employment, no matter who they are, less than 70,000. And that 70,000 is actually what you pay an intern. And that's why they're paying youth corpers 77,000. And in fact, I heard that even though they started last month, they will also pay even those who have passed out. We use that word passed out, a very funny word. But those who have left or those who just finished, will be paid in arrears. So we need to put ourselves under pressure and also have a stakeholder meeting or view of how do we take this forward. You know why? Because President Tinubu, the presidency sitting in Abuja, is responsible for less than 100,000 civil servants. That's less than 100,000 civil servants. Okay? And about 2 million people who work for the federal government, whether they were policemen or army or any other, including all those parastatals that seem to have sorted themselves out, they seem to pay so well. I don't have to mention them here. So these 2 million people, let's say 2.5 million people at most. What about the rest of Nigeria? They live in states. They're under the purview of states. So I'm putting the challenge back to the private sector to do right by their people. And mind you, Dr. Abati, before I let you chip in, we are also seeing a scenario where some sectors are doing incredibly well. I mean, I can't mention the banking sector where you see that a number of banks are declaring 1 trillion in net profit. However, the problem we have there is that most staff are no longer unionized, most staff are casualized. They don't even have many real staff anymore. So there seems to be the real challenge we have now is actually quickly bridge the gap and reduce the inequality that seemed to have appeared, especially because it's not even a global affair. Remember that post-COVID, sir, people like Bezos, like Zuckerberg, like Peter Thiel, like our friend who runs Doge today, their fortunes have doubled and tripled after COVID because of the impact of technology. And now we're looking at AI also making its incursion, meaning that it's a double jeopardy. So now is the time to put these issues on the table, not just to blame President Tinubu, because the gentleman, and we're going to probably be able to talk about some of the reforms, is doing his best and is thinking medium to long term for Nigeria, not just the immediate.
Okay, quickly, let's make this thing very simple. Do you agree that there is hunger, poverty in Nigeria?
It doesn't define Nigeria. Yes,
I
agree,
just wait.
But those things don't define Nigeria.
Just wait.
And it's not as pervasive
please.
as it's sometimes made out in the media.
Just wait. Poverty, as I'm here now, I'm hungry.
Exactly. Look at you. And that's the point exactly.
And I'm dealing with multidimensional poverty.
That's the point exactly. Yeah.
You must have heard of when President Tinubu came to Lagos. And they told him, Ebim Power, we are hungry. It's not only in Lagos that they had that. Now, government has responded with the distribution of palliatives. That's why they are distributing rice
constantly
all over the place.
Constantly. It's a constant
So do you think that this palliative economy, this palliative economics is the way to address the human development crisis arising from the failure of government to deal with the challenge of poverty and hunger, further compounded by insecurity?
Okay.
This one has nothing to do with PPP or whatever. It's just basic.
PPC, for us who are economists, maybe, I mean, you've been around. You've been around. I'm an economist now. That's what I do.
No, leave it. There's a lot of voodoo there.
Let me say this.
Talk about us.
Let's
we people dealing with multidimensional.
You mentioned palliative, you mentioned insecurity, you mentioned poverty and that. So now the thing, if you take it from the insecurity, the problem with insecurity is that a single news or two can knock off a perception of increasing security. But if you look at Nigeria, if you look at it on a geopolitical basis, Northwest, we are having fewer and fewer of all of those 2G people coming and marauding. Northeast, it's been a while since we heard about Boko Haram. Southeast, that used to be really insecure, since these two gentlemen have been incarcerated, we've seen that there's been a reduction in that. There's every country has a bit of crime. I mentioned the fact that in the UK, in most parts of London, you can't even use your phone on the street now. So that's that. But of course, so there'll be a certain element of insecurity. I think this government has tried a lot in terms of reducing inequality, but there's still a few blowouts from time to time that sets us back, which is a constant affair. So now in terms of palliative, I personally am not a fan of palliative. However, palliatives are very important because the whole idea is that you find a scenario where some people just have no capability. When China was working on what they call the Targeted Poverty Eradication program in China, what they did was to document each household. And when you get to some household, I saw President Xi Jinping go to some of those places, and some household, their problem is disease. Maybe there's disease racking the head of the house. Some people is illiteracy, and so on and so forth. So they documented. That's why it's been a success. And that's why China seemed to be sitting on top of the world today with the United States panicking, and so on. So the palliative is important for those kind of people sometimes because they just can't feed. However, it's not supposed to be a very constant and unending affair, ad infinitum. So that's why the president has done two very critical reforms. So a reform around the Naira. The reform around the Naira is what led to the depreciation of the Naira. So let's it find this level. At 1,500 or 1,550 today, thereabouts, it's swinging between is a managed floating system that we are running. Okay, so fair enough. You see, the thing is, I mean, a place like South Korea, the currency is about 21,000 just a second, I'll just land now on this issue. So it's about 21,000. They're still surviving and they're doing pretty well with their industries growing as well. You know, so we can manage it around where it is. But what it has cost, and I mentioned in the reforms, what it has cost is it has released a lot of money, especially to the state governments. If you see the last report from the Debt Management Office, Nigerian states and FCT, they paid down 32% of their debt. That's very remarkable. Okay, and if you look at the reforms in the petroleum sector, has opened up that industry. Now Nigeria is almost a net exporter of refined products from a position where we were actually a country that was producing 1.5 million barrels that couldn't refine even one barrel. So this has released a lot of money to the state level, and I think that the focus should also go to the state and, you know, to put them under a little bit of pressure.
Understandably, you have a lot to say, a lot to say on this topic. You know, you speak about these gains, but here we are talking about the average citizen, the common man. Yeah. And that's why we refer back to that conversation about the PPP and a meal for $1, because we're taking this conversation back to the majority of Nigerians. Yeah. Now, since we want to use economic terms here and we want to have let's have, because you said that it was an elevated economic conversation that you had where you said in Nigeria $1 is still enough for a meal. Well, in the same Nigeria in 2022, the GNI coefficient, which I'm sure you're aware of, the measure of inequality in a country, for those who may not be aware, with 0 being perfect equality and 100 being highly unequal. 2022, before this administration came in, it sat at 35.1. By 2023, the end of 2023, after this administration and its reforms came in, it now plummeted to 48.9%, meaning that we can justify all of these reforms and the petroleum sector is working, whatever. But the truth on the ground is that the disparity between the 10% of Nigerians who are holding on to over almost 40% of the wealth of the country and the other 50% who only own 20%. Yeah. No. You're saying that this administration has come in with reforms that have created such economic breakthroughs.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Don't misquote me. I said there's a medium to long term plan.
So we can accept that in the midterm, we have plunged people into poverty.
Part of what?
In the short term,
I also mentioned
in Nigeria.
I mentioned the US, for example, which is
in Nigeria.
In every country in the world,
the US does not have the level of inequality that Nigeria does.
I think you should check. The US Gini coefficient is at least 51%.
It is not.
I did my research. I even wrote an article on this. You know, I was going to ask you where your number came from.
World Bank.
I was World Bank, either World Bank or CIA. Let's know. You know, but the point is that Nigeria had always been around 35, and Nigeria was one of the least unequal countries in Africa. The worst country in inequality being South Africa. Even in South Africa, which was standing at about 62%, it has got worse.
But do these countries not have? But they have social security nets. In the United States, you can go to the hospital.
That the government,
you can go to
Dr.
school.
Abati mentioned.
So can I go to the hospital?
Absolutely.
For free?
Depending on
and
where you
treated?
live. Absolutely. You can in Nigeria.
School?
Health is free. School is
Running
free.
water?
You went to a private school.
Running water?
Now, probably not even in Nigeria. You know, we have our challenges anyway. But, you know, let's and this takes me back to the issue of 1,500. Remember, please, as against those who have been misquoting and sensationalizing and all, nobody is saying there's no poverty in Nigeria. In fact, luckily for me, I got people sending me videos from Lagos to Maiduguri showing that they actually ate for 1,500 yesterday. If you're earning minimum wage and you're struggling in life, you know, you have to make choices like that. In fact, I personally was somewhere in Lekki yesterday, precisely Black Bear. I saw that someone could eat for 2,500 there.
Black Bell.
2,500, even in Lekki Phase 1. You know, I mean, I didn't know where to go. Someone just took me there because I had another interview.
People can't afford that.
So yes,
now.
People can't afford that. I agree, but I think that empirically speaking, my statement was correct because indeed people. And I said something. I said 8,500 is a lot of money to a lot of Nigerians, and that's because I acknowledge the fact that a lot of people are down on their luck and poor. So if saying 1,500 is a lot of money is not a mockery of those who see that as a lot. If you are leaving this place now and you gave the security guy 1,000 naira, he will appreciate you. He will have a meal on that. And that's what I'm saying, that a lot of Nigerians are in that category. And again, remember, I said my raison d'etre, my reason for shooting on this is to say that, listen, the private sector and even the government sector must be put under pressure to understand that this inequality is increasing, okay, as against what it was before. In fact, the most equal country in Africa was Algeria. You go to Algeria, Tunisia, those guys seem to have a system that works for them. Egypt isn't doing as well. The most unequal being South Africa and Namibia, where you see some very high, which compares with the United States of America. But we can't rest on our oars, Rotus. We can't rest on our oars. We know there's a problem already because, again, post-COVID, and when something as cataclysmic as COVID happens, sometimes it takes 10, 20 years for you to come back to. We're hoping that the President Trump's experimental governance this time around will not set us back even further and cause another global recession.
We're running out of time. Very quickly, just two quick questions. Mine is on power, but I also represent our YouTube constituency, and Shay is asking you, how do you expect private companies to pay more minimum wage when there's a lot of taxes to pay coupled with the high cost of running business? That's one. That's it. My question is on power. We're talking about the meter assets program with the government. Should the government be providing meters? Can you not open up the market for Nigerians to be able to buy meters themselves? The way our phones track our use of data and airtime, you buy your own meter that tracks your use of power. Those are the two questions.
So I'll talk about that meter then. Firstly, about Sheyi's question. How do we expect private... Listen, inflation got to 36% simply because people marked up their prices. People who were either you're offering consultancy service, you're selling anything, you have marked up your price. And that's why most companies that are viable, I always quote that, are not pricing at the same level as they were pricing or invoicing as last year. Not even the banks. Everybody everybody who can has already increased, and that's why we must tell the private companies to do better. Listen, you know why? Because it's easy to blame President Tinubu. I mean, you're a CEO, you're making money, you're balling, and all of that. You leave your staff in the lodge, and then when they complain, say, there's no. You just bamboozle them and say, it's Tinubu that spoiled the country. No. It is not. Fair is fair. Okay, now, this may not fall in the realm of capitalism. You're sounding a bit socialist, right? But you see, fair is fair. It's in the realm of governance and society, ESG, society and governance aspect of ESG to say, let's all be more responsible, including, mind you, the states that have refused to start their minimum wage. And mind you, minimum wage is not just about increasing for the lowest person to 70,000. You have to make an adjustment up the hierarchy, at least up to people who are like assistant managers and so on.
The power question.
The power question.
The meters.
You mentioned the metering.
Meter program,
so we've tried a number of things in the past, including local producers, and I think we still have them, but they're not producing at the level. So I think what the government is trying to do really is to say, let's make a push to see whether we can actually mass import this thing, because the distributors complain that people are stealing their power. And it is true. There are places in this country where people don't believe they need to pay for power. They believe it's a national cake. We can just tap into it. And that makes the whole structure collapse. So we've tried that. We've tried different other ideas around this power, around this metering thing. Certainly we must meter. However, I have an out-of-the-box idea, which I believe that, look, we aren't trying to solve our problems our own selves. We've had Siemens coming to Nigeria, General Electric coming to Nigeria. We're looking at those kind of big projects coming down. In places like Germany, after the Second World War, what they did was the engineers who could power their houses, and then connected their neighbors, and before you knew it, it became a community and then up. Here we bring the national grid, and then we hope that it will come down. And a lot of the infrastructure has been damaged. I'm aware that Minister Adelabu has been doing a lot and sending a lot of proposals with a view of repairing this damaged infrastructure, which is tremendous. So I'm thinking, that perhaps we should get to the point where we say rural infrastructure, and I've also spoken with the MD of the Rural Electricity Agency, who took down notes on this and felt that it was a good idea. Let our universities and polytechnics get in the fray, especially in the villages near them. Let's begin to challenge our students and lecturers to begin to do stuff, to experimentally go to the nearest village, try and set them up on solar or wind energy. There are mini turbines that you can use. There are mini hydro that you can run. There are biomass that you can deploy, so that we can also begin to develop the capability of our young people and pay them for it. Pay them a token for it. Let them get involved in those projects. And the projects in our university should no longer be those lone wolf projects where somebody goes and writes a fantastic thing which get dumped in the dustbin 2-3 years after. You need to see where they dump some of the projects that our people have written. Let's have group projects where they can work together. And the same thing goes for things like roads and all those little infrastructure, village roads and so on. Should be done by our students with pride, and pay them a little bit, and let all the big companies that want to get big contracts come and mentor them, show them how to drive the payloader, how to grade the land and all of that, so that they'll have something in their CV when they're living. Listen, we have to think in that fashion and think long term for this country. Otherwise, again, like Dr. Abati said, it becomes a palliative thing. We bring these guys, they do something, it breaks down, and then we're back to square one.
Okay, Dr. Fasha, I think I stumbled on another article that you wrote. Another statement that you made, where you were, advising Nigerian youths not to japa.
Absolutely. They shouldn't, as much as possible.
And you were saying, invest, be resilient, this and that. Yeah, I thought at the end of that piece, my reading of it, that you were more or less contradicting yourself.
How so?
What the average Nigerian young person is saying is that the Nigerian government has not been able to meet his or her expectations in terms of providing security, welfare, and opportunities. And you are saying these young people should be the ones to carry the load
because
of Nigeria.
It's their country, sir. You go to Canada. I mean,
in a country that is not giving them opportunities, in a country where the hope that they have been promised, they are not saying it. They go and be struggling for palliatives. They die in the process. The roads are not properly tarred. So you are shifting the burden. Doctor, and we are saying the burden is on government.
Doctor, yes. Leadership is a liability when you say you can do it. Everything you have to inherit all the assets and liability. And if oftentimes the liability is more than the asset, so it's what it is, But sir, I'm saying that those Canada, US, and co that we run to, were built by them as well. They were built by those people. A few people, ensure that those places are the way they are. We also have a country to build. Okay. So whereas we cannot, just a second, please. Whereas you cannot convince the average Nigerian youth to stay in Nigeria today if they have an opportunity. My opinion would be that they should go and learn and come back and develop their country. Remember, this Japa phenomenon, even in the UK, I did my master's in the UK. Most of my good professors have now Japa to the US as well. So we should also begin to have a program where we can get people to come into Nigeria from Ghana, from Sierra Leone, from Liberia, from Cameroon, to come and work in Nigeria.
So guys, you have seen the mindset of the people who are advising Tinubu on economic matters. So you don't want that far, when you see the country failing, because their reasoning, their understanding is totally different. For them, Nigerians are joking. For them, Nigerians are playing. And it's really so sad for somebody who is advising. This is somebody who wants, campaign to become president of this country. You can imagine if he had succeeded to become the president of the nation. This one you'll be telling Nigerians that Nigerians are faking their hunger. Like people will tell you that if you've not joined the APC, you will not know what you are doing. That when you join the APC, your brain will stop working. And that's just what we are seeing. Look at Reno Mokri, who once said he would never support Tinubu. Now he's dancing around him. And now Tinubu is now using him as his attack dog against other people on the social media platform. Look at this man who once vied for the position of a president. So with this kind of mindset, tell me how he would have successfully led the country. Now they are making money, they are enjoying, he can travel out and come into the nation, and he feels Nigerians are faking hunger. That's to tell you that this APC-led administration, they are not here for the masses, they are not here for Nigerians, they are just there for themselves. Anyway, let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Please give this video a like, so that YouTube can recommend it to others, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you.